And also that's a kind of a lead-in, I mean, it's a sort of strange sort of lead-in to these houses, which are much more sort of contemporary work, I suppose, work that we sort of seem to be the most well known for at the moment. Two houses in particular, the Klein Bottle House and the Letterbox House, which are both down on the Mornington Peninsula. And superficially they have a kind of similarity of language, but they actually are quite different projects. Firstly, Klein Bottle House. There's the Mornington Peninsula, the sort of Great Bay of Port Phillip Bay. But the peninsula has been, for many years has been the holiday place for Melburnians, so it has this sort of great kind of memory. It's an interesting sort of part of the city in a way, because it's sort of the place where you go to release from the city. And it's a place where if you didn't have much cash, you camped on the Raye foreshore or the Rosebud foreshore, or if you had a little bit more, you built a fibro shack, and if you were rich, you built a sandcastle. And interestingly, it's a place where there has been an enormous amount of experimentation in housing, even up until the present day. Famous Hendy House by Roy Grounds, which, apparently the streets were lined with people wanting to see that home. Houses by Chancellor Patrick, a beautiful building that is just very simple structural truss. And then even up to the contemporary day, some of Sean Gonsal's most famous houses. And I guess some of this sort of heroic modern period is a period that we actually really like. This isn't on the peninsula. This is actually a house that is in Kew in Melbourne, but a house that we think of fondly. It's a Peter McIntyre house called the Snellman House. It's basically a very simple spiral which negotiates its way down the sort of contours around some old eucalyptus trees, and it seems to be a beautiful resolution of function and topography, which in a very singular and simple gesture, which is something we liked. And when we started this house, which is, as I say, on the peninsula, I should say it's on the back beach of the peninsula. So if you're thinking back to that map, there was a sort of bay beach and a back beach, and it's on the sort of back sand dune. So it's a heavily sort of tea-treed area. And we started off looking at the idea of a spiral, the idea of kind of coming down to the beach and sort of unwinding. We wanted to nestle it into the sand dunes. There was a kind of a negotiation with the client where they had the sort of tendency to pull it up the hill, and we had sort of tendency to pull it down. In the end, we found this kind of midway position, which is sort of a sheltered position just off the top of the sand dune. But in doing that, in playing with the spiral and playing with the topography and the position, what happened was the spiral kind of gave way, and effectively the spiral intersected itself, and we immediately recognised it as the Klein bottle sort of popped out on us. And the Klein bottle is, interestingly, a kind of basically a representation, I suppose, like a physical representation of a mathematical model. It's not a true representation. It's just a way of trying to describe the mathematical model. And in fact, so the story goes, it's actually a misinterpretation of the German for surface, which is very similar to the German for bottle. So there was a sort of confusion and became the Klein bottle. But it sort of took on a life of its own, and if you go on the net, they're just everywhere. I mean, they're quite beautiful objects, but they're things that people become quite obsessed by. This sort of object that has no inside and no outside and sort of passes through itself. And they have these sort of, this field of mathematics, I think, has a sort of, obviously, an interest for architects, because it sort of seems like, I suppose, new form, and architects like to think of getting inside them. And there are all sorts of different types. This is a double on the bottom left somewhere. There's a double figure eight Klein bottle, I think it's called. There's some buoy surfaces up the top right. But, they're fascinating shapes, but they're very difficult to turn into architecture, it's true. When you go on the net, you find artists who've used them, and you find kind of lunatics that seem to be obsessed by Klein bottles. You find Lego Klein bottles and hundreds of beanie Klein bottles. But the ones that we quite liked were the origami Klein bottles. So we quite like that sort of ironic change from the bottle, because it's such another representation of the representation. And we like the origami, and we we made one of our students make an origami Klein bottle, and she left. And so we thought that'd be quite nice. And
she came back though.
And then thinking about origami, we thought about white, and then we thought the sort of black and white, we can get the sort of fold, and you know how you can, with Yoda here, can use the different colours to accentuate it. We quite like that.
We actually got a fair bit of criticism for winning the Dulux Colour Award for this one, but we did explain that there's actually like 6 shades of white.
Believe it or not.